I leave them with themselves. That's the beauty of life. It's your journey. Every one of us, it's our experience. Um, there's no external reality. It's your perception of it. It's your embodied experience of it. It's your feeling of it, right? You don't like something. It's like, okay, maybe what is it bringing up for you? What is it reminding you of? Where is it taking you? It's inside of you, right? You like something. Okay, great. What is it reflecting about yourself, or what you want more of?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Gomes Show. My name is Gomes. I'm your host, and today we have an awesome, inspiring, powerful individual, Sean Stone. He's a filmmaker, media host, author, actor, poet, speaker, and above all, truth seeker and spiritual activist. After decades of working on ways to communicate a deeper meaning through art and media, Sean is now at the forefront of a movement for freedom of autonomy, freedom of choice, and overall freedom of self. Thank you, Sean, for being here. I am so appreciative of your time, your energy. Thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure, man. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. I'm so happy that we got to meet in person last year. I think it was September. I think it was in Miami. And it was so great to meet you in person and connect in that way. We actually went to the beach together and got to experience the ocean together, which was really awesome. So I'm grateful for you being here and honestly doing what you're doing and speaking about all this stuff that's happening and making the shows that you are. I'm sure that people are grateful on many levels for that.
Well, we just do what we do. We do what we do, and we trust that it reaches some audience.
Yeah. We got to normalize these conversations. I believe the only way to change reality is to keep speaking, keep talking, and not feel that fear or pressure from these governments and centralized sources. So
it's a great Pink Floyd song.
Yeah.
Keep talking. I don't remember that.
Exactly. We got to just keep talking.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is kind of go back in the past and start where you started, where your journey started and how you ended up here. And specifically, if we can start, when was your red pill moment? The red pill moment that kind of shook you out of the matrix and gave you that awareness to speak about this stuff.
Well, I honestly, I'm very lucky in the sense that I didn't really ever belong in the matrix. I've been blessed in that sense of, having parents who were pretty open as far as, thought was concerned, and never really, feeling like I was indoctrinated into any particular tradition or way of seeing the world. Yeah, very much, parents who were, interested in like different religions, right? Religious comparison and always believing like in my mom especially, like, believing in God, but never trying to define it through one path. My father obviously is a filmmaker who was making controversial and enlightening films in the 80s and 90s in particular, on socio-political history. And so, he was challenging the norm, with movies like Salvador, about the death squads in El Salvador, and Platoon, which was, showing the gritty dark side of the Vietnam War and the anti-heroism, right, of combat, and Born on the 4th of July as well. And then, JFK was like a total, and counter mythology to the Warren Commission lone nut concept. And Nixon obviously was a follow-up to that, like very much about some of the political conspiracy at at the heart of politics. So it's like you go up with that with that kind of worldview. So it's not really, wasn't shocking to ever see things and be like, wow, my worldview was shattered. I would say that there is an aspect within me that I think was the aspect of me in my childhood that grew up on GI Joe, that grew up on this idealized version of America's the good guy, right? And even that, even given like, yeah, my father's making these films about the dark side of, current American history, but like there still was this, hey, like we're the good guys, and we've gotta, go fight the bad guys concept that was played out through the Iraq War one, and the Kosovo War, and then Iraq too. And so I think for me it was deconstructing that on my own, not just through my father's perspective, but through my own, understanding of the deep state, the CIA, black ops, and the financial control system, right? And that
Mhm.
was just through high school, and into college, reading, uh, studying, understanding deep politics, as they call it. And yeah, so there was some aspect of, you know, wanting to like hold on to that mythology. I think all of us had a loss of innocence moment for our generation, the
Mhm.
millennials, with 2001,
Mhm.
because I think our parents' generation had their loss of innocence moment during the Kennedy assassination. The World War II generation had their loss of innocence with Pearl Harbor, right? It's like you have to go through that loss of innocence moment where it's like that fairy tale of, the world the way that we thought it was. It's not the way that way. 9/11 was that moment for us, and then I guess maybe for the Gen Z, it's 2020, with the
Mhm.
pandemic.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting to look at history and just entertainment in general, and how movies and TV shows, they're like tied in a little nice little box, and it feels good, right? It feels good to watch, and it makes sense. But reality is not like that. Reality is volatile and chaotic, and I agree. I think every generation has had a moment where they had to kind of look at themselves and go, "Wait, what? What is going on here?" And start to question, or else just be deeper into the fear. And yes, I
Mm-hmm.
agree. 2020 is this generation's Pearl Harbor, this generation's 9/11, all that stuff. So the listeners, if you guys don't know by now, this is Oliver Stone's son, Sean Stone. And I didn't want to mention it. I didn't know if you wanted to mention it, so you kind of aired it out there a little bit. But you guys, this is a hearing the little bit that you've already shared. You were basically born into the red pill. Like you came out already with the red pill ingested.
Exactly, exactly. That's the syndrome of mothers that take drugs. They give it to the child. So there you go.
Yeah, yeah. You had it in already. So let's talk a little bit about this last couple years, these last 2 or 3 years. For myself, I'll share a little bit about myself and my journey with that, and then you can respond to yours. For me, it really was the moment. It wasn't a red pill moment for me per se. Like I became very aware, very instant when that started happening, but I felt this urge to speak out, to like, man, I gotta start talking about what's going on. I gotta normalize this conversation because they've normalized it on mainstream media. And if somebody else doesn't normalize something different, or at least something that's opposing it, then what are we doing here? So how was it for you? When did it become real for you, personal for you to start really digging a little deeper into what was going on?
You mean like you're talking about like in my high school years? You're saying
No, no,
with
no. In these last
oh
two or
with
two or three
2020?
years, yeah,
Oh, with
2020 to
2020 was
2020.
like, man, when I you've been doing what I've been doing for decades. I mean, I
It was
was
just
on.
another one where I was like, oh, here we go again.
Let's go back. I mean, let's go back like 2000 2008. I made a short film called Singularity, which was about a pandemic, or a global virus, that plague, that basically creates such fear that they essentially suspend the Constitution, and they create an AI surveillance state. So it's a very dystopian, like Blade Runner esque, short film about these guardians that take people away that are deemed infected, because the AI, all-seeing AI, tells you that they're infected, and the whole conversation at the heart of it is like, well, how do you know that they're really sick, and how do you know that there even is a plague, and how do you know that
You made
you know
this in 2008. What in the
yeah.
world?
I can see where this is going, because to me it's like, I study history, and I got my degree in history, and I just love history, so I'm always looking at things like, okay, well, 2008, it was really, we were living in the Patriot Act era. We still are, but it was like,
Mhm.
it was really, the 2000s were dark. dark
Hmm.
decade. I mean, to me, like where we are now is so much brighter and so much better than we were into the 2000s because people were in that fear zone of the war on. They were like in shock. It's like it was almost the 2000s was like, it's like when you get punched in the face and you're just kind of like frozen and in shock and then, just
Yeah.
kind of like start to lose your mind. Like that's the 2000s to me. It was just such a depressing decade because America had just been punched in the face with that, those towers being taken down. And it was like the darkness of it and the fear and then the surveillance state that followed. And I mean, I was monitoring this stuff like right before Facebook. Remember, there was like they wanted to create like an office of information awareness or something like that. And it
Hmm.
was Poindexter, who was one of the Iran Contra criminals, was going to be in charge of it. And it was like there was so much backlash against this.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, like, okay, the CIA, I can't remember, it was like CIA, FBI, all these different guys that were like, okay, we're going to cancel our surveillance program. And then like, then Facebook gets its patent.
Oh
And
my, it was
next thing
right
you know,
after. Yeah. Yeah.
right, then you have like the Facebook but it was clear like there was surveillance going on even before Snowden. People were talking about it. It was known that there was like surveillance and data mining and it was just clear like okay, once you're into this information evolution of technology, the internet was blowing up in the 2000s, right? It was like we were entering this more digital spaces, right? A little
Hmm.
bit more virtual spaces. It was clear what was going to come. Like okay, that's information. Who's going to collect it? Who's going to use it? So to me, it was predicting that and then recognizing that um, viruses and plagues have always been one of those things that's like creates such an irrational response. Like the
Hmm.
same way that we talk about like death, right? Our fear
The
of
enemy
death.
you can't see, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like
Yeah.
wars are things that are like you can manufacture, but it's you still got to rile people up, right? You got to get them motivated to go fight this country, right? Whereas with like a plague, it was just like, man, and that was the whole debate at the core of the short film was how do you know? Like, how do you know someone's really sick? Oh, because they're said they've been tested or whatever. Like the AI tested them as positive. So you're just
Yeah.
trusting
Yeah.
that. And I mean, obviously we saw with the PCR testing, the same principle, right? It's like, oh, the PCR tests, even the guy that created them was like, these things can be, they're basically, they're going to see what you want them to see, right? You,
Yeah.
you, you create what you up,
Hmm.
but if you're doing it for defensive purposes, it's okay. So that's how they got around it, right? It was like if you're studying how to defend against an anthrax attacks, you can make anthrax. If you can, if you're
Wow.
studying,
I didn't even think about it like that.
yeah,
Whoa.
yeah. And if you're studying like how to create like an Ebola vaccine, you can make Ebola. I mean, it's like all these different things. That's how they got around all these different, these treaties and stuff. So she was talking about this in the conspiracy theory episode, that there was going to be basically like be careful of the vaccination agenda, be careful of just like the whole, creation of viruses and just like it was inevitable, and that's the feeling I think that a lot of people got. So every time you saw these little things pop up, like a Zika or an Ebola, it was always like, okay, how much is this being manufactured and being pushed, and what's the real agenda here? And then it all came together. 2020 was just like it was so surreal because it was a fear virus. Like I believe there's that COVID is like a spike. There's a spike protein that was created and it has HIV and all this other crazy stuff in it, and it is it's a tough virus. I know people that have been sick, for
Hmm.
my age who have been, were down for like weeks, sometimes for months. So I think that there's truth to it. But as far as how much the fear, right, the fear played into it, that's where people like myself are just like, it's like 9/11. It's like, okay, come on.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
gotta get past your fear of, especially fear of death. And once you come past your fear of death, you start to really open your eyes in a different way, I believe. That's the main thing that they know humans have this innate fear of death. And unless they've worked on themselves and done the spiritual work, if that fear of death is there, man, like what lengths will people go to? Right? We've seen it, like how irrational, how crazy will people get if they're afraid of death and the threat of death, or to themselves or their loved ones. And that's what
Yeah.
we saw.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. It's like the placebo nocebo effect, and the fear, the fear that is being manufactured. There's this fear that's being created with entertainment, media, all that. It drives actions, especially those like you said that haven't done their spiritual journey or become aware of that. Of those fears that are taught. Um, it's I love your perspective on all of this in these last 20 years. This is something that I'd actually never heard before, where the 2000s were actually the dark times, and this is actually the light. And it makes sense. I'm so happy that you shared it in that way, because now I am seeing it for what it is. It's true. That's, the darkness being, that's when our eyes were covered, and we were just reacting from the fear and allowing or externalizing our power to these governments to help us or secure us or make us feel safe. Yeah, that's powerful. So I had a question. Why all of this? Why create a global a situation that creates that much fear now? Why now?
Yeah. So, I mean, so again, like in terms of the timing of 2020, and there's some that theorize that this was being planned out. As we discussed, like it was inevitable, right? But some people thought it was going to come out sooner. If Hillary Clinton had won the election in 2016, that this literally could have been unleashed in the wake of that, like anytime between 2016 and 2020. You think about why these things get unleashed. It's always for more control for the global government, right? Which is something that I study with my my history thesis at Princeton. When I graduated, I had to write a thesis, so I got into the New World Order agenda, which was their terminology. It was the British Empire's terminology for essentially how they were going to govern the world in the wake of the British Empire becoming a commonwealth, becoming more benevolent, right? On the surface, it's like, okay, we can't govern through military power in the same way that we could, and financial control the same way we could. So we're going to kind of like shift into like a different face, right? Like a friendlier face, friendly fascism, as we call it. So it's like the New World Order is the global government agenda, and we've been seeing it in America for over 100 years. Going to this concentration of power in the federal government, which is nothing like what the founders of the Constitution expected, right? When they created the federal government, this bloated monster that I've heard like. It's like almost half of our GDP is spent by the government at this point, between contracts and 40% or something like that. I mean, think about it. How many contracts the government has with the private sector, big tech, military industrial complex, scientific complex, right? The big pharma companies. I mean, who was running the freaking warp speed? It was the government. It was the DOD and company, right? They were, who was paying for it? And that's why I was always laughing. It's like, those shots are free. The COVID vaccines are free. I'm like, yeah, they're free. That's why Big Pharma is making hundreds of billions of dollars. Yeah. Who's paying them?
Yeah.
The government's paying it. Oh, that's right. It's free. Good job.
Really, and even the rewards, they're like, hey, come get free donuts and we'll give you a free shot. It's like,
exactly. Like every one of those shots is how much, $100. I don't know, whatever it was, was paid for by someone else is the point. So for you, it's free, but whatever they take out of your taxes. So the point is, we've seen this explosion of the federal government. So everything I see as far as like these agendas, it's always a concentration of power. It's always about financially like reallocating money into the hands of the the elite, the global financial elite. It's like the best way to control people is through fear and manipulation. That's what I focused on in my docu-series that I put out, Best Kept Secret. It's called, it's available on Vimeo, and we released it really to show people like how much enslavement still occurs on this planet, from the physical slavery, like physical human trafficking and sex trafficking and pedophilia and things like this, to the actual like, okay, economic, mental slavery, spiritual slavery. Are you really awake? Are you really in charge of your experience on this planet? Or are you basically just being told what to do? Wear your mask, go here, stay 6 feet apart. You can't go to work. You can't do this. It's all the same symptom. It's
disconnecting us from
power trip.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like disconnecting us from ourselves so that we can externalize the decision. It's like, hey, if you don't believe in anything, if you're not speaking up for anything, you're going to be speaking up for somebody else's thing or somebody else's belief system.
Yeah. And that's you asked about like my red pill, but like one of the things that's always interested me since I was a kid was just like, what is power? And I love shows like Game of Thrones because they really, they draw upon history. to kind of to really get you into that realm of like, oh, you think, that everyone wants to be the king, right? Everyone wants to sit on that throne, but like, how deadly is that throne, and how
Mm.
and what is it to have power? Okay, you're the king, but you don't have the support of this general, and they get assassinated, right? Or the bankers, you don't have the support of the bankers. Guess what? You can't do anything. You can't wage your wars. You can't protect yourself, right? You don't have the
Mhm.
support of the spiritual side. You don't have the support of the Vatican, the whatever, like the spiritual, influencers, right? Well, what's real power then? It's like
Yeah.
it's so interesting how power works because uh, that's why these guys, I believe, the elite, the so-called, that have generationally been, educating each other in a sense of like worldview warfare. Really,
Hmm.
that's what most conspiracies are. They're worldviews. People talk about like the rule of law. It's like, okay, who writes the laws? How do these, who's creating the laws? That's the conspiracy right there. So those that write the laws are the ones that know how to be above the laws. When you
Hmm.
really understand it, it's like that's how the power is wielded, is through creation of laws. And then it's like, okay, so if you're using these systems of, you know I'm creating the treaties, I'm creating the laws or whatever, so that I can basically wield power. And then you talk about like finance. It's the same, it's all the same principle. Finance, like people buying into, like, what is money? Money is just based on a rule of law. There's no actual intrinsic value in that paper.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
It's not like
It's a
gold
debt
where,
vehicle. There's no real
right?
money.
Right? It's not like gold that like is basically been valued as real money. Even in our Constitution says like, the only real money is gold and silver. It's coin. It's like everything else is just freaking like just paper. So what's valuing it? Oh, well, it's laws that were put into place, basically saying like, well, it's a promise to pay. That's all it
Hmm.
is, right? A Federal
Hmm.
Reserve note. It's a promissory note. So, but again, like people buy into this system, this dream spell, and that's where I've seen like a lot of the nature of power in my lifetime. It's just like it's dream spells. It's people getting seduced into things, into like, okay, well, just okay, we'll go with that. Like I'm gonna believe in that. Just like in Oz or whatever. Like I'm gonna believe in the wizard
Hmm. Yeah.
until you get to that moment of revelation, and you're like, oh wait,
And then
no,
Toto runs behind the
yeah.
curtain, peels it back, and you're like, oh, it's a little dude that just is shorter than I am.
And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, wait a minute. I don't have to be afraid anymore. I don't have to believe
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Right? That's
That's
the
why, I
moment.
mean, I agree with you so much. I mean, that's even in what I teach in my courses, we spend 4, maybe even 5 weeks on your own relationship to transactional energy, your relationship to self, relationship to others, how you view yourself physically in relationship to the systems. Because without that awareness, without that peeling back or letting go of the old beliefs, it's like you can't fill the cup up if it's got a bunch of junk in there. You got to
Yeah,
dump it out and then be able to see the light.
exactly.
So I found out by reading your bio that we actually graduated from the same acting studio, Baron Brown
Yeah.
Studios. Shout out DW. And I followed that path for myself. I started acting when I was really young. I was 11, 12 years old, and I around 15, I'd say, is when I became aware of how powerful that entertainment was, how powerful movies were, and how much they can, you can with a combination of variables of frequency, visuals, the story, the psychology, you can essentially present a nice little package of an ideology and normalize that, especially if you do several versions of it. So, what would you say that was the reason why you went down that path, because you saw that with what your dad was making, and you wanted to speak out through media and through entertainment?
Mm.
And is that the best way? Like, what is the best way to
Yeah.
really expose what's going on?
I mean, there's so many ways. It's like media is beautiful because it's fluid, it's flexible. Like there are people that are influencing, millions of people with YouTube channels or TikTok videos. I mean, it's the fluidity of the thing that is what's fascinating. I always look at media as like psycho-spiritual warfare, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that allows one person to gain notoriety and influence millions or billions of people, and another person who maybe is talented and has a voice, but just doesn't hit that nerve, doesn't connect to that collective consciousness in the same way. it's one of those mysteries, right? There is some level of manipulation, but that's clear. We know there's agendas, right? We know there's gatekeepers, but there's also, there's this collective consciousness that does seem to transcend it, and each of us having our own destiny in this experience. So I don't know that, like, I would never tell people like there's one way of doing it, because obviously we've seen in this time period a lot of the false light, a lot of the stars that people may have had, idolized in the past, like being revealed for what they are, and maybe, just being humanized. There's nothing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not every star is on adrenochrome or something. I mean, it's just, but it's saying, like,
Yeah.
let's let go of like this pedestalizing of people. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's very much what this time period is about. It's letting go of the idea that, it's creating gurus. Essentially, it's creating, idols. It's creating, whatever, giving people privilege, or some kind of red carpet. I mean, it's like, no, no. It's about, this is the time period for us, each of us, to claim our royalty and to know our worth, and so we can respect everyone, and appreciate what different people offer, but we have to let go of that less than concept, because that's really how we've been, as humans, have been so manipulated. When you think about it, like, how do these things work? How does servitude, how do you get millions of people to basically become servants of an ideology, of a state, of let's say, governments that are, designed to be inefficient and unequal. um
Mm-hmm.
when, like, not to say nature is equal, but like, everyone is equally created by the same maker, and we should all have, the right to pursue our passions and our joys. And you think about, like, how Hollywood is supposed to work. It's like, well, first of all, there shouldn't be gatekeepers. It
Mm-hmm.
should be really much of an opportunity for people to feel free. And yet, look at how many stars are, the past stars are afraid of, like, following their passion and their truth. They're, like,
Mm-hmm.
so caught up with perception game, and like, falling out of favor, right? And it's like, really, you go to Hollywood and everything is inverted. Like, all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff that's being sold to the American public, right? About whether it was like the COVID stuff, whether it's the LGBTQ agenda to kids, like, all this stuff, right? Like, in Hollywood, all this stuff makes perfect sense, right? And if you say anything against it, you're kicked out. But then
Yeah.
you go
It's
to the
like,
rest of
are
the
you
country.
PC? Is Are you politically correct?
Exactly. You go to the rest of the country and you're like, what the hell are you guys talking about? What are you doing over there? But it's been an experiment. Like, California has been it's literally been an experimental zone for 60 plus years. I mean, going back to, like, the boomer generation, at least.
Mm-hmm.
San Francisco was such a hub, right? Silicon Valley, the hub of experimentation through computing, and everything that can be designed. We were talking about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
for influencing people through information. Um, but even that is connected in many ways, the gateways of the portals of the computer, and the design of these windows, right? They did come from LSD journeys, right? Steve Jobs was so influenced by his journeys. So it's all reflections of consciousness, and there is something to the experimentation process that Hollywood has been a major part of. But I also feel that it's time to basically, like, chop the tree down so that the seeds can now can now fertilize, like, the rest of the country,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
have, like, many Hollywoods, many medias, many studio, systems that are built up in every state. Every state
Mm-hmm.
has its own studio system. How about that? So that you don't have to go to Hollywood if you want to make it. You can, stay home in your own state and tell stories that are resonant for millions of people, or whatever, thousands of people. It doesn't matter. It's just like, you know, we don't have to, like, go and try to fit into someone else's vision anymore. That's the way I see it.
Ooh, I love that idea. I know that there are other studios around the U.S., but yeah, I imagine having it in every state. I do know that production companies won't go to the state if the state doesn't give them money. I've heard a lot about that with production companies. But I agree. I think the more decentralized we are with the way that we present this information and communicate, the better. And we're gonna get a little bit into that a little later with what I'm in, which is blockchain. But before I do, you mentioned gatekeepers. So I agree with that. I feel like everything that I mean, even right here, we're communicating through basically three or four different gatekeepers. You got the app. I got my iOS operating system. I have my internet provider. I have Zoom or Riverside here, and so we have all these different layers to be able just to see each other's face and communicate. So would you say that for you, for your personal journey, have you had to deal with any censorship from these gatekeepers, like any sort of suppression or, shadow banning or anything like that?
You know, we all face gatekeepers, and it's I think the deeper you get into the system, the more sensitive you become to it or aware of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you either go along and figure out your ways, you navigate it, um, or you go through bouts of being out of favor and out of flavor, right? Um, but I don't know. Like the thing is that often, most of the time, you really don't know when people say no, right? And like, because Hollywood is all about rejection, right? Like most actors and you name it, like, writers and directors, even like everyone knows, like mostly about the rejection. You don't know what's behind the no. You don't
Mm-hmm.
know if it's because they don't like what you said, they don't like you personally, or they just don't vibe with your idea or your personality or whatever, what you're presenting. You don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you almost have to, like, for me, I'm actually like this. If I'm not inviting, if there isn't censorship, if there isn't hate, if there isn't something coming, then I'm not doing something right. I'm not being too PC or something. So yeah, I think that's a great perspective. If anything, just keep talking, right? Keep the narrative that, or the belief that you have, keep it going out. Um, so a quick question: what is your favorite piece of literature that you have? I know that's a very broad question.
My favorite, like my favorite book I've ever read. You say
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Just
that's
because I want to keep on the theme of your family and just all the writing that you've done. So I'm curious of what would be your favorite book.
my favorite book. I mean, it's like asking someone what their favorite movie is. It's asking. I always say, asking someone what your favorite movie or your favorite book is like asking someone what's your favorite memory, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, can you real boil yourself down to like, yeah, it was that memory? No, it's like, man, this is the beauty of life, is the contrast. It's the fact of, great, terrible, and everything in between. But what sparkles at a moment of insight, right? And so,
Hmm.
um, I can't say like I have a favorite book. I can say that in my soul, like there's a strong resonance with the story of Les Miserables, and I feel like very resonant with that story. Um, but yeah, maybe that's a theme of, I don't know. Maybe it's a soul theme. But yeah, I guess I'll share that now because that's what's coming through. Now tomorrow it might be a different. It will be a different feeling, and it'll be a different story.
I love that. I love what you just did, which is like, yeah, it's in the moment. If I whatever because I don't use a lot of my intellectual memory when I tap into that kind. Like if somebody were to ask me that question, I'm like, what's the feeling coming up? And then I'm great that you answered. I'm happy that you answered it in that way. It was a really good answer. Um, so here's another question. With everything that's happening in society right now, uh, between men and women, the races, the LGBT community. What do you think is actually happening here? Do you think that we just need more good men, more good women? Uh, why is there such a discord with the agreement of genders and just the masculinity to the femininity? What's going on?
Well, believe it or not, I'm of two minds on this. Like I'm on everything, right? Like there's the traditional perspective, which I honor, and I'm like, yes, there is masculine and feminine. Those are a man and woman can never be the same. They're like two different species. I look at it, right? So it's like, you know, a horse and a donkey, right? Or like whatever, a cat and a dog, right? They're two different species. And yet in a galactic way, I feel like there's something that's happening that is about consciousness evolving, And so there things always move like, it's just like it gets wonky when you're moving in consciousness, and you're coming to a place where the masculine and feminine are reestablishing relations in recognizing like new aspects of themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
so, men are meant to become more sensitive and more feminine, and women are meant to become, in some ways like more directed, and they've been doing that, right? They're more like
Mm-hmm.
they're working, they're more they're working outside the home, they're more exterior, focused than, traditionally, right? They were more focused on domestic life and nurturing and emotional life and things like this. So there is this idea of like truth in the male and female recognizing more of each other. And that, of course, is going to manifest in confusion, gender confusion. And then there's the agenda of gender confusion, which is like, let's tell kids that they don't have a gender based on their biology. But now you're going against nature.
Yeah.
So when I look at it, I'm like, okay, there's a manipulation of a natural order of things. The only way that you can achieve that manipulation is in the transhuman agenda, which
Mm-hmm.
which is the philosophy essentially that man is not necessarily made by God, and not necessarily designed in a way that's harmonious and perfect, in conjunction with conscious evolution. It's the idea that like man's an accident, and so we can perfect him.
Yeah,
And
you're
that's
just a machine, and we can upgrade you.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so we're just going to, basically work to make you better. And work, self-improvement is beautiful. And once you start manipulating the genetics, once you start merging yourself with machinery, robotics, looking at yourself as a biocomputer, that's where I think you're going to run into real problems, because now you're going against the natural universe. So the way I see it is that there's like there's these two realities. There's the reality of the virtual reality, where in virtual reality, yeah, you can be a blonde haired, you know, Playboy bunny in virtual spaces. And you can have an aspect of you maybe that feels that way. But guess what? In the natural world, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
so so the point is that we have many realities kind of at loggerheads.
Yeah.
So you say like a log, they're loggerheads. They're kind of they're conflicting, and they're working themselves through. And so I'm walking around kind of like, there's just many different experiences of this reality, and it's coming to the fore now. And I think some of these things are manifestations of soul memory, of soul confusion, of um, maybe like there's definitely a transhuman agenda here, because the more you can have sexual transition, it's becomes like basically impossible for, I don't know, I guess some people can detransition, but for the most part, I mean, it's like you're pretty
Yeah. It's
much,
irreversible,
yeah, you're pretty much,
mostly.
exactly, you're pretty much like on that path. So what's going to change? It's going to change your ability to procreate. So if you've got an agenda which has been articulated for decades about depopulation, there's too many people on the planet, right? So what's one of the best ways to depopulate? Well, let's make all the kids think that they're the other sex. And now like, 20-25% of the kids start doing sex changes, and all of a sudden they can't have kids. Well, what did you just do to the
Boom.
population?
Hmm. Wow. Yeah, I love that you put all that together. I never really had myself kind of connected the transhumanism push with this side of things, with the gender confusion that's happening. But that makes sense. Yes, disconnect ourselves from the multidimensional layers that make up us. Keep it one dimensional, and then create confusion, create chaos,
Mm.
and then you have to choose.
Yeah. And we're
Um,
fighting the wrong things. Like when we're fighting over this, like the things that really matter, it's ultimately it's a government that has no business in our business. Like that's the
mm,
way I see it, right? Like really the things that we need to be establishing is our sovereignty as men and women. And so ultimately it's like, look, if you as a sovereign being choose to do a gender change or to dress this way or whatever, like that's your sovereignty. But the idea of the government pushing this agenda, paying for people's sex transitions, I'm sitting there going, okay, great. So the government's going to pay for your sex change. Does the government pay for people to heal from cancers or for stem cell surgeries and I mean, stem cell treatments and things like this? No. So does that really make sense to you?
and even in Canada, they have the MAID program, and it's for assisted death. So
Yeah.
they'll pay you to help you die
Yeah.
if you want. If
Yeah.
you want.
Well, there you go. So that tells you everything, right? Like
Yeah.
what's the agenda? the agenda is to, is to reduce the population.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned earlier about technology, and I would call it escapism. They're normalizing this metaverse really so that people can escape to it and not be in reality or not have to deal with reality. So I'm the blockchain guy. I do crypto. So I have to ask this question: what is your perspective on blockchain, crypto, Bitcoin, all of that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm very much, it's all, how do you say, we're playing with, like I talked about earlier, playing with like fiat paper promissory notes, right? And it's a promise to pay. Well, when are you gonna pay it?
Mm,
When are you gonna redeem your dollars for gold? You're not, right? So, I'm not like, I'm very much whatever systems can work. Bitcoin, I think, was a great model of how these things can work as far as digital currencies are concerned. Um, just like anything, the biggest the biggest hurdle is just the common acceptance of it,
mhm,
right? So that you can start to transact, so you don't have to like, I don't know, Bitcoin has been used for so much trafficking of money laundering and human trafficking and really dark stuff, drug trafficking,
mhm,
things like that, unfortunately. Um, but as like a modality, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like there's a limited amount that's available, and the whole mining thing I don't fully get, but hey, I mean, people obviously were out there, spending a fortune on energy mining mining Bitcoin. Um, and again, like it's a why can't it be traded as a currency? I don't see why not. I think the whole concept of currency is just like it's like energy. Okay, well, if whatever you want to transact in, you should be able to transact in.
mhm.
And then when it comes to blockchain, I love the concept of the transparency of it, as we shift into a more holistic approach to self-government, to basically to relate human relations to business, all these things. Like, yeah, we should have more transparency and ecosystems that really give back and reward what people put in, so that right. It's the same with Hollywood. I mean, think about like how much of these Hollywood went crazy with budgets and things like that, and a lot of it was just paying people exorbitant salaries. And it's like, okay, well, what about just the concept of like you have a stake in the project, you actually trust that you're going to get paid? Because
Mhm.
it's true, like most people weren't getting their back end, so they had to get paid up front because they're like, I don't trust you're going to pay me on the back end, even if the movie makes $1 billion, right? So I think the idea of transparency is really important for business, so that you can actually take the risk, you can get paid a fair salary, good salary, but still like have the knowing that you're going in there with a participation to actually profit from the success of the business. So that's where I see like a blockchain, and obviously it has many other things that it can offer, but I
Yeah.
like that principle to it.
Yeah. I mean, just to compound on all of that, for blockchain in general, I think it's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful concept. I believe that it has many intrinsic variables to it that gives it value and worth. That really is not like, it doesn't matter what happens outside of that ecosystem for it to be valuable. But also, like you mentioned, you can use it for so many other things. It's like it solves transactional businesses. So anything that has to do with transacting or has to do with money, basically, it can facilitate that. Um, I'm actually working on a project right now that is actually doing exactly that with a documentary. It's the same team, and I can say this because they already shared it, but it's the same team that did Seaspiracy and Cowspiracy.
Yeah,
They're doing one called Christspiracy now, which is
heard
about.
about this.
Have you heard about it?
Yeah, like the diet of
Cameron
Christ, and
Waters and I forgot
that he
the other
was
guy's name.
like focusing on the diet of Christ and like the way of
Yeah,
Christ, right? Like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and how they were like when an example he gave me. Actually, I don't want to give that away, but it
Mhm.
all has to do with the murdering of animals and how that was the commerce at the time, and they were sucking it into the religion. And he was like, nope, this is not going to happen. So it's like this huge shift on perspective of like why Jesus was there doing all the stuff that he was doing. But
Mm.
one of the things we're doing though is we're using the blockchain to create. So we're going to allow people to be a part of the documentary, like buy into it, raise money through it, and then the royalties of it gets distributed through a smart contract.
Mm.
So like you mentioned there, how can we trust for you to give me my royalties in the long run. Well, with blockchain, with these smart contracts, it's a trustless system. It's going to execute no matter what.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's so many solutions that that blockchain in general can offer. And I believe that the difference is awareness. If you properly use it, it can be used for good, for sovereignty. It's a tool. If you improperly use it, it'll be the easiest thing to track and trace everything you do.
There you go. And that's exactly what we don't want, right?
Yeah.
We want transparency for business, like for basically for business transactions with each other. We want transparency for government, right? We don't need the transparency on the other side where they're looking at our privacy. We need
Yeah.
that separation.
Yeah, exactly. Proper use. That's the key. Awareness and education and research and doing the work.
Mhm.
So before I ask that last few questions here, I want to just say thank you again so much, Sean, for this time. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate you and everything that you're doing, truly.
Thank you, brother.
So what? A few more questions here. What are some daily self-care practices that help you stay grounded and not be triggered in those emotional moments?
Oh yeah, I mean, I can't say that I don't get triggered. I would say that it's a journey, and for me, the my daily meditation is like a good way to start. I love Kundalini yoga. I love breath work. Um, Qigong is another,
Mm.
just connecting to the energy
Mhm.
of your being. It's bringing self-pleasure and self-care into our existence is so important. uh it's like we really just have to appreciate this body, and not just like working out and doing like the hard stuff, but also just being good to ourselves, to our body, giving ourselves that love, that petting ourselves, right? It's just like, yeah, this is
Self-care is not selfish.
exactly. It's not. It's an inversion of people like have been taught so much about the external existence, right? Doing good to others, being good to others, but the problem is that they haven't been good to themselves, so they can't be good to others. And it's
Mm.
like the more we're good to ourselves, as we know, like what happens? We're nicer.
Mm.
When we're in a good mood, what do? We're nicer to others. When we're in a bad
It-
mood, we're terrible to others. So it
it's a
really
it's a
starts.
it's a mirror and a magnet. All right.
Mm-hmm.
we gotta. I always tell this to my students: the reality that you live is who you become. Like the reality is going to be who you become. If you become the thing you want, the reality will happen.
Mm. Exactly. Exactly. Just
So with
embody it.
every, oh,
In
say it
fact,
again. I'm
let's
sorry.
just embody it. Like
Yes.
one of the things I was so shocked by this by I was Peter Joseph, who created the Zeitgeist. He put a Chomsky quote up on his Instagram, right? And I said, oh, Chomsky, the guy that says that unvaccinated people should be isolated from society and quarantined from society. And he said to me, he said, uh, people are nothing. They're just vehicles for ideas.
Oh
I said,
wow.
I said that's completely dissociated because this is an embodied experience. And
Yeah.
if you really think that like that we're just vehicles for ideas, then you've basically chopped your head off and put it in a box.
Wow, that's such an interesting perspective or like share there because actually Zeitgeist was my red pill moment. That was my red
I've
pill
heard
moment
that
when I
from a lot
watched
of
that movie.
people. I interviewed him years ago, and I think we like went on different directions
Yeah.
ideologically. Um, but it's like it's really interesting to see how people are get very in their heads, and they're very like deep thinkers or philosophers, but they're just in their heads and they're not in the embodied experience. And this is what we were talking about before. In the head space, it's all possible, right? But it never fulfills until you come into the heart space. It's like then you're connected to everything. In the headspace, it's just endless labyrinths and journeys and dreams and da da da, whatever. Like it's all possible, but you're never going to get to that place until you come to the heart space.
There's no true manifestation if you don't embody, if you don't bring it down and actually allow it to fill that space. I
Mm.
agree. Wow. I'm wow. Good. I'm so happy you shared that because like I said, Zeitgeist was one of my first pivotal moments in reality, and like becoming aware of everything. And then Loose Change was the next one about 9/11. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, if you can get stuck in the intellect and waste your energy on thinking of all the possibilities that could ever exist. And sure, they can all exist, but which one do you want? Which one are you embodying and becoming? And that's the reality that's going to actually happen.
There you
go. So last question here. You have a few minutes to speak to millions of people. What do you leave them with?
I leave them with themselves. That's the beauty of life. It's your journey. Every one of us, it's our experience. There's no external reality. It's your perception of it. It's your embodied experience of it. It's your feeling of it, right? You don't like something. It's like, okay, maybe what is it bringing up for you? What is it reminding you of? Where is it taking you? It's inside of you, right? You like something. Okay, great. What is it reflecting about yourself, or what you want more of? Trust that. Trust that inner guidance. Trust that inner knowing, and allow yourself to be guided. That's all I can offer. Just, I'm not here to tell anyone what to do. You're not here to tell anyone what to do. We're not trying to seek that position of power over. And anyone who is trying to manipulate or influence or tell you what to do, it's like, beware of those false prophets.
Yes. Thank you for that. I agree 100%. Trust your gut. Trust yourself, because that's the only one that matters. That's the only person, individual, and information that really matters, because that's the effect that's going to have on your life. Thank you so much, Sean. This was a powerful interview. I really appreciate it. Is there anything that you want to leave everyone with, or plug something?
I'll just plug them. I guess I'll plug them to my SeanStone.info, my website. That's got the links to like Best Kept Secret docuseries, my other documentaries, my books. I think that's the place. That's the portal.
Yeah, and make sure you also check out his Instagram. You're constantly on there posting stuff. It's The Real Sean Stone, right, on Instagram?
Yeah. But perfect. Again, like, it all links. SeanStone.info has got links to all the social media. So that those that use Instagram or Facebook or whatever, Twitter, right? It's all linked through there.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. And I want to leave one last thing with everyone. Always remember, gamify your abundance. And I'll see you guys next time.